back to my data and listen carefully to whatever you had shared with me during the course of my interview with you in
Yes.
August of last year, July of last year. And then I had all those, um, I wanted a bit of detailing done, especially on the, you went through what you had shared with me, especially about the core values and how they are related to your well-being, especially because
Go ahead.
so
You have your questions, so use your time, no problem.
yeah, yeah. So, okay, so that's my first question would be, what according to you is, how would you define happiness for yourself? Like personally, what do you think is happiness?
So I don't know if I have a single definition, but there is some set of thoughts associated with it.
Yeah.
The one that appeals most to me is that it is not something to be pursued.
Hmm.
It is something one realizes as a contrast effect after being in that state of pleasure where you're fully engaged in doing something that uh, gives your intention a desired expression. So, like um, it could be as in one of the examples that Mihai gave in his book on flow about a chess player being so engrossed in the game that doesn't even know if this is the right time to go and relieve the bladder. So they're fully absorbed. But when they're in it, it's not happiness thereafter, but in expressing your creative intent in playing the game in such manner that you're giving the best from yourself, right? That it's same with musicians, same with other people. So when you look back at that experience, you say, "Wow, that was a great time to be in," and that, in sense, is the concept of happiness that comes closest to me. The other strand of thought, if I may, is about being fully alive in the present moment. And this is not so much about skill, technique, or mastery that a chess player would have or a musician would have, but as much as about giving attention to the internal body and fully being aware of the inner space as opposed to
Hmm.
what others may be thinking of you and things like that. In that sense, therefore, the present moment is a space one gives oneself. And if that is there, then that's another happy state in that it's maybe being in touch with one's unconscious, but it's a different state of consciousness. Uh, Being fully alive in a way that you're in touch with almost what's more universal and cosmic as being part of you within, and that there is no need to look for it outside of you. So there's no past in that sense. You're fully present. Your body contains all those memories for which you need not do any conscious searching. And at the same time, you're free from any future related anxiety in that this is the only moment that matters. There's no point in being um, perturbed by what's going to come. There's no sense of calamity and all that. So that's another state of happiness, if that's the word that you're using. But
Hmm.
uh, underlying both these conceptions for me is it's like a sense of pleasure as opposed to what one might call as pain. And therefore, it could be as a result of confidence of meeting any threat in the environment and all of that. But that's not so much the happiness. The happiness piece is more like it's a pleasure principle. Not exactly hedonism for hedonism's sake, but definitely absence of worry. So I don't know if I've come across.
Hmm.
Are you
Yeah.
getting what you want for your research? I don't know.
Yeah, 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 absolutely. This has to be your what this has means to you, and personally what how you would define it. That is what I want. So yeah, absolutely. Um, so if I can just go through, you mentioned some sources of happiness. I'm just opening the
Yeah,
email.
you'll have to reconstruct a bit of that for me because in your notes they appear headers
Yeah,
beneath which there's a lot of text that you still have to put in, something like that.
yeah. So I went through that. In fact, I went through it again,
Mm.
and they you've actually mentioned them as points like this towards the end of the interview, when I've
Okay, you
asked.
construct your query anyway for this moment.
Okay, yeah, okay. So I'll just let me just open that email. So just yeah, how does where do the core values fit in your definition of happiness, and how do you look at them uh,
Mm.
as being that uh, driving force in your life, you know, or the platform from where you're viewing your entire life.
Yeah, so I think this brings to me a different kind of perspective as well in the work that we do. Values are personal, subjective space.
Hmm.
Okay? It's not that between two people they don't know how to relate to a value, but that between two people for the same set of values,
Hmm.
each person may assign it different hierarchy.
Hmm.
Like, for example, let's say if I say that honesty is a value.
Hmm.
Now, honesty could be an instrumental value in that that's the way society needs to operate so that it has a functional norm of give and take. There may be more core value beneath it, which is to do with integrity, authenticity, and things like that, which is more like uh, less instrumental. It's not a means to achieve an end, but it's your state of being. In that sense, that kind of value.
Hmm.
Let's assume that there is somebody who, out of a sense of gregariousness and caring as a value, decides to donate some money to a charitable institution which is doing social work. Has been doing that regularly. Suddenly, it comes to light, especially in the press, that somebody in that institution has been embezzling money. Now, there could be two kinds of responses based on the value hierarchy two people as donors have with the system. So, one person might say, that's a no no, I will not give money to that institution anymore.
Hmm.
Another person might say, well, for me, my giving is to transcend such expected variations from societal norm. That my heart is in the right place. I shall continue to give. But for me, it's it's a moment where these people are more vulnerable as an institution and they need the money more because they've been deprived of the money. And I shall continue to give. Which means that these two people come from two different kind of value hierarchies. For one, the violation of the integrity principle became so strong that the person has corrected his own here. And for the other, the person has integrated what I might call a societal malfunction within his value system. To say that this is expected to happen, one cannot expect a flawless society. So, for me, therefore, values are very personal, subjective spaces. I hope the example brings forth that two people have subjective orientation to that,
Hmm.
right? So, therefore, values have their space, but values as a source of reflection, uh, review in emerging contexts,
mm,
because as context change, the meaning of the review has a role in it. So therefore, uh, the intensity of belief in that value may go through some change. And to me, therefore, values are not just personal and subjective, but also give reflective space. So, for example, I remember a time when authenticity was something that would really rile me. And if I don't get that in the other side, it would be a kind of a marker, boundary marker, not to engage in relations of particular kind. But now, when I review similar incidents or same incident of, say, 20, 30 years ago, I would look at it as, no, there's something that caused this person to be that way. And one need not be as, um, let's say, globally evaluative in one's tendencies so as to be sounding self-righteous and moralistic in that stance. And therefore, there's more charity of perspective around the value for me today. And that gives me the opportunity to look at um, the polyvalent character of people, that they come to each occasion the way they are, but what does time do to you when you reflect on these values and review them? Then there's a different way of looking at incidents. So in that sense, therefore, values go through hierarchy reorientation. So we reorder our values in some sense, right? But one may not stray from them. One may still stick with a few core terminal values, but the way you operationalize some um, of its operational consequences, that changes. Are you getting any clue, or do I need to?
no, no, absolutely. So, what you're saying is that though the core values remain, the interpretation and usage of those values, in, especially in engaging with people,
Yeah,
uh,
so going back to my example,
something
when I said,
something that possibly alters with experience
hmm,
and understanding of those values.
yeah, so something that I can go back to my example is that honesty is more like an operational value for me now,
Mm,
whereas the deeper core value for me would be things to do with justice.
mm,
Justice cannot exist without a realization of honesty, but
mm,
justice remains core, or we can see shades of honesty in the sense that some people don't even know that they are being dishonest. They're not aware in the moment that they are saying something dishonest. So for me, therefore, that reordering has happened.
you're willing
Right?
to give space, more
Yes,
room.
I'm giving myself more space to understand others. That's the way I would look at it.
Mm, you're less hasty in making judgments.
That's right. One has got more perspective. The what you call the perceptive acuity
Mm.
has widened with
Okay. So, do
yeah.
you find your relationships with others to be more? Have you in a way increased the not only the circle of interaction but also the quality of interactions with people?
Yes,
Do
both
you find
have changed.
that too?
Yes, both have changed. So the variety of interactions as
Mm,
also you can say the quality in a very qualitative sense. It's not that I'm making that a goal in the relationships. I'm giving myself to the moment, but I'm giving myself in the moment to a variety of people. Like, for example, yesterday I was dealing with another research interaction, which is with a aspiring master's level thesis project. And there I may not come across as I'm coming to you today, but that's a different kind of thing. Here, I'm a subject of your research process. That's a different kind of thing. So on the research continuum itself, there are two kind of things, right? But in the quality of relationship, for example, yesterday, uh, I had to give time to listen and then said, look, um, there is a sense of reality that you must bring to your process. because you had to give a draft of up to a certain section on Thursday night, and you seem to have forgotten that that was due. Not only that, you seem not to be aware that your uh, roll call on the presentation for your proposal is X number, and it doesn't seem to you as something critical. And the person didn't really know that it was so, although it was shared. And then, therefore, the sense of reality is a different thing. So, the way I qualitatively involve myself in that relationship is also informed by how I'm looking at the overall commitment in that relationship. Whereas with you, it's a different kind of quality. For example, I mean, it's been 30 years, 1991 to 2021. And for whatever is at the common intersection of these two, um, we've grown in our own ways. You've grown in your way, I've grown in my way. Um, but the quality has changed, the variety has changed in that sense that I'm meeting a more career professional in you, and you're meeting whoever you think I am today. So both the quality and the variety has changed. We've changed our roles, right? So like the people whom I interact and attract and so on and so forth, both have changed. The quality of interactions is also like morning I was with children ranging from 2 to 10, and today I'm with you. And well, yeah, it's both. It's quality as also the intensity of the relationship. Both. Yeah,
And has this quality of relationship in any way added to the well-being and happiness quotient that you experience?
I would assume so. I would assume so. So, for example, this morning, it suddenly struck me. It's about 6, 7 nights we've not been having deep sleep, and it's because of Anne's father. He's going through asthmatic kind of thing, right? And last night I slept well. Okay, so in the morning, suddenly I realized that our batchmate Janelle's father is struggling in care condition in Goa. I thought, let me just check how he's doing. And he's the reverse. He sleeps more and is awake just a few moments because he's going through a different kind of condition after a stroke and stuff. Okay. So then it struck me, hey, she's the same batch. Then I informed her, look, when she asked, so how's work going? Then I said, look, I've just been able to work with Pallavi and Sharnaz through an option they thought they couldn't handle by themselves. But of course, they've been collaborators in the project. So you see, uh, well-being on both sides, as you can see, um, definitely improved. Uh, definitely, let's say it's a new kind of awareness that um, one is bringing to the realms of probability and possibility, and the novelty of the awareness itself is the well-being. I think that's how I look at it.
Hmm. Yeah. So basically, what you've been saying is that it is something which, of course, you can be mindful of in the present, but it's more of an after effect of having been involved in something that you enjoy doing, and now the
Mhm.
memory of that is bringing you that feeling of satisfaction.
Yeah,
That's how you are describing happiness.
yeah. So, as I said, happiness is. I don't think. mm, I mean, I might put it this way.
Hmm.
Happiness became almost like an objectified campaign, thanks to the way
Hmm.
Western academic thought have shaped it, especially after Seligman. Okay, but during Seligman's time, there wasn't as much neuroscience, etc., available. So today we know that there are pleasure centers in the brain and all of that stuff, right? So what we're seeing today is that the objective pursuit of happiness, as has been perhaps enshrined in a very civic way in the American Constitution, itself may cause the tension. And that's what gave rise to that work by Susan David on emotional agility, in that you can't be hooked onto it in such manner that you're depriving. other inner body awareness with regard to the fine-tuned uh,
Range of
subtleties of
emotion.
emotion. Yes. Okay. So what we are faced with today is actually that at a personal level, perhaps there's even a nun in Myanmar who's happy within, but is in a
Hmm.
social context where there's breakdown, where there's disorder and anomie, right? And therefore, I mean, it's a very stark example just to say that social systems today are not geared to provide an objectified view of happiness to people living in the system.
Hmm.
And at the same time, people in living the system are getting to a state of consciousness where
Hmm.
they can take care of it themselves. There is a parallel thing happening. There is social
Hmm.
anomie and disorder that's only increasing and increasing because we are far outstripped our capacity to shape those systems, whether it's government, political, religious,
Hmm.
all of that. At the same time, there are more and more individuals who can access what quote unquote is the inner awareness and conscious awareness in that sense. So, having stated this, therefore, is happiness a term that I will objectify today? No, I will not.
Hmm.
But is it a state, an emotional state, rather than a trait? Yeah, that I'm willing to accommodate. There are times that you can be happy in the sense that it is a pleasurable state to be in. Yeah.
Hmm.
So there is a contrast effect that when you're giving
So,
your intention and meaning fully to a purpose that um, elevates you, well, that's a pleasure moment. And if you feel that that's worth trapping into the definition of happiness, the way you operationalize it, okay, let it be so, no problem. But
hmm.
otherwise, intent, meaningful participation in a purpose for which you bring several related activities together,
Hmm.
and there's also possibly use of creative uh, intention also there, that you're bringing forth something that did not exist the way it was before. So that to me is important to uh, how I need to express myself. So that's the joy in the work we do, like we saw recently. The kind of reading I did for this project, I wouldn't have done it in that order before, right? And I read a few new works. So that is important to me. So that's,
Hmm.
and when I look back and say, wow, I did it. Yeah, yeah. But the skills required to navigate that is something I've built over time. So there is the creativity involved, but it comes from skill and technique.
Yeah. So the opportunity to use your skill and create something which uh, is deeply satisfying and meaningful. And so the memory of that experience is
Yeah, you
the,
could say that.
the
Yeah,
emotional, the positive emotional state that we're talking about,
yeah, you could say that.
right?
Yes.
In a two-line definition, is that what you're trying to say?
Yeah. So,
And the fact that
I
you
mean,
call it an emotional state and uh, not an object,
yeah, no, it's an inner state awareness.
a state awareness, not an object to be pursued. You cannot
No,
run
no,
after something.
no. To
It's
me,
not
that's not
holding.
happiness. Yeah, to me, that's not the quality of
That's not.
pleasure. No,
Yeah,
no.
yeah, 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 yeah. Okay. So,
So there is a there's a trapping in the word, but the word need not be it,
um,
right?
yeah, yeah, absolutely.
It's the concrete experience of it. So if you say there is a place where we get very nice paratha in Amritsar, paratha is a word, but the consumption of it, being in it, is more like it's just an
Yeah,
association memory that you associate with the word, but
the
being in it,
joyful experience.
Yeah, being in it is important.
How immersed and aware you can be of
Yes,
all your
yes,
daily
yeah,
experiences, which are adding up to the pleasure
yeah,
that you associate with certain experiences.
yeah. And one doesn't do it merely because you can get that state. One does it because you're summoning a lifetime of learning
Mm,
into that moment. Uh, Repetition, therefore, will not satiate.
mm,
Recurrence will not satiate me. I'm not, therefore, I mean, to beat the beaten track is not what happiness is.
mm. No, but if you're saying, if you're relating it to being aware of the present moment and being just
Yes, yes.
now, in the present, um, then that is actually very repetitive because every moment is like the previous moment.
I don't see how that can be. Just
It's
take,
even life
just
continues, right? And you're just you're being, and
so,
consciousness is
just take it, an example from nature,
mm,
and it's been said in many cultures. One doesn't step into the same river twice. What does that mean? That means there is movement. Nothing in the
change.
past. Yes. So
Mm,
every present moment is distinct from a previous one.
yeah, yeah.
And one doesn't know what's yet coming up.
No, no, no. That is if you objectively look at moments. But if you
So
look at you experiencing those moments, you will experience it in the same manner. The
no,
moments are
there's
different. I'm not denying that. I'm not denying that the moments are different. Every moment will be different from the other moment. But
no, no,
but
Jan,
you as
what you
robot
probably
experiencing the moment are
oh
going to
what
experience it the same way because however you are conditioned to live your life, you will continue with that conditioning. You will just continue living it like that.
now there's where I was coming to. You're looking for the pattern that explains this state of
Mm.
experience. Now there may be a pattern.
I'm just asking you to clarify what you mean by that it should not be repetitive because life in
Yes. So for example,
is an emotional state is very repetitive. Okay, it's like irrespective. Today I got happiness from eating a paratha, or tomorrow I get happiness out of eating a rasgulla. See, I'm not talking about the sensory kind of sources of happiness. So in a way, I am the enjoyer of those situations. I am the experiencer, and I am the one getting the happiness.
I get it. Where you're coming from is that if this is an observable phenomenon, what predicts it?
Mm,
If this is an observable phenomenon, then what can control it? Okay, that's a science-based paradigm. Okay, when I say that uh, if something gets routine and repetitive,
mm,
it's not likely to yield me the kind of pleasure.
mm,
Get it? So, for example, we do things as habit every day, as hygiene, whether it's brushing teeth or taking bath, things like that,
mm,
right? And there is, if you might look at Japanese or maybe even Chinese kind of philosophy, um, it is a sacred thing to do because for them, in between those everyday moments,
mm,
the mindfulness gives them what they call satori, satori. It's Japanese, right? And if you're present in those moments, one gets an insight that one has not got before. So even in the mundane, it's possible to experience.
mm,
But the way you arrive in that moment
mm,
is is inimitable. It cannot even be imitated by yourself.
mm,
And therefore, uh, you know, my my kind of mention that it doesn't come from repetition. It
mm,
comes from the uniqueness of the moment. Like, I'll give you a concrete one.
mm,
Uh, Last week, we were sneezing away. I told you about the mold on the sheets, right? And we held that hypothesis for a while. Then one is suddenly very perceptually alert, and I look around, and we have a toothbrush holder, and I looked at the toothbrush and I found certain fungi there, and I was wondering, so is that spreading in there? And my wife says, no, you just have to wash it off. And I decided to keep the toothbrush up and away in a dry place where it is not likely to be affected by moisture, right? And after that, of course, we even changed the sheet. But what I'm trying to say is that in that moment, therefore, I'm not satiating myself with a known trigger. I'm also looking for other triggers,
mm,
right? And then I find that, very close to the toothbrush stick is also my shaving stick, and even that has got the fungus. So then I wash it off with hot water and stuff like that. So what I'm saying is, you're doing daily things, but you're arriving in this moment with a new way of looking at it.
mm. Yeah.
And, the, and that's the novelty and non repetitiveness that is taught.
Yeah. Okay. So if you were to use all these answers, and also go back to a question that you previously framed, which is really good, and that is, what are predictors of happiness?
I think there you might, if you use that pleasure state principle that I mentioned as things, yeah,
Mm,
I think self awareness is definitely one among them. And
mm,
although it's been talked of in different literature already,
mm,
uh, if I look at myself in terms of self awareness, it's about honoring the value and uh, related systems one has cultivated over decades, and therefore subjecting that to a temperament in skills and technique for your breadwinning. And being therefore aware that man is simultaneously social, economic, political, and all of these things together. In that sense, therefore, your self-awareness in psychological domain, spiritual domain, material domain, social emotional domain, all of that. And that overall self-awareness is surely uh, uh, predictor of happiness. For example, uh, there are several people who do their daily tilling of the land,
mm,
and for them, happiness may be just seeing a seed coming into a sapling and then crop and stuff like that, right? Uh, and they've been using this agrarian skill over centuries. To them, at that subjective level, that could be happiness.
mm,
And to see a series of natural symbols, whether it's rainfall, sunshine at the right time, or government arranged irrigation, or government arranged electricity supply, all of these things could be predictors of happiness at that very operational, you can say, most popular conception of creativity, I mean, happiness. But what happens with people who go through more formal education or more, um, you can say, scholastic aptitudes, etc., uh, then the inherent predictor of happiness is greater than merely the farmer's example. So, if you're asking it to me as a generic question, very difficult to say what predictors of happiness may be in that sense. But there may be another way to explain it, is that the absence of
Hmm.
certain things may surely lead to not being able to enjoy the pleasure.
Hmm.
For example, if there's a drought or a famine of some kind, then obviously the farmer is
Hmm.
in misery. Uh, the pandemic may have hit many a student, like your own son, and that takes away from the enjoyment of what one loves to do in a scholastic aptitude or whatever. So those could be predictors as well, meaning the absence of certain conditions could lead to the absence of happiness. But to
You're
say
talking
that
about adversity,
you
adversity.
part,
You're referring to adverse events.
yeah, or conditions that are non-conducive.
Hmm. Okay, like possibly even like you gave the example of Myanmar. So
Yes,
breakdown in governance, breakdown
yes,
of rights and freedom and things like that.
yes. And that gives me opportunity to say that happiness is therefore not a solo construct.
Hmm.
Man, being social animal,
Hmm.
is unlikely to experience happiness without being in very productive relationship with significant others or others.
I see. Hmm.
So
Hmm.
maybe that's a major predictor.
Hmm. Hmm.
Or perhaps in Indian traditions, you could go off and sit and meditate in the mountains after reaching particular levels of yogic skill. Yeah. Uh, but does that give happiness? I don't know. I can't
Hmm.
speak for that. Like there's a book called uh, Apprenticing with the Himalayan Master, or whatever. There's a gentleman here close to Bangalore by name Sri M. He's a Muslim from Trivandrum who's gone very close to where Jiddu Krishnamurti has is a place called Madanpalle, and he has a huge following. And he was somebody who some kind of um, guru or whoever told him that he's going to reach this kind of state sometimes when he got some gift or insight from a Himalayan master. But he realized that his happiness is not on the mountain. He came back to society to spread it. So that's one of the closest examples to say that
Hmm.
isolating oneself may not be a predictor of happiness.
Hmm. No, no, I agree because man is a social being
Mm.
and definitely is bound to get affected. Though, of course, uh, there's a slight, uh, I think, a little going deep into the concept of how the situation outside affects your happiness. But at the same time, a nun in Myanmar, given the situation, is still finding happiness. So it's basically how you're interpreting it and how how you're relating to your environment, how you're making sense of what's happening.
Now
So,
that you're conversing, yeah, now that you're conversing, I
hmm,
think there is a predictor that I'm willing to call out. It's
hmm,
self-control.
hmm, exactly.
To
Yeah. Okay.
to differ to differ um, what might be
Hmm,
immediate and spontaneous pleasure
hmm,
for a more purposeful and meaningful future. I think that is more genuine joy than
hmm.
I
Okay.
think there is. probably a shade of ethics involved in that. That one is
Mm-hmm.
willing to put aside any notion of immediate gratification, uh, so that the value in social transaction is enhanced beyond the current moment for a longer duration or whatever. I don't know if I'm getting the right words right, but self control is a predictor. Like, for example, if I look back at my own life, uh,
Mm-hmm. Now
I
you're
could
coming
have
to,
picked up,
mm.
beg your pardon,
I said now you're coming to the emotional intelligence.
I don't know if self regulation and self control is tamed within emotional intelligence enough. There is social awareness, self awareness, and stuff like that. But this kind of self regulation for self efficacy that I'm talking is more from a Walter Mischel point of view. Uh, like, for example, if I look at my own life, I could have chosen to just stay stuck in a typical blue chip corporate career kind of thing where you keep advancing from one position to the other. And just yesterday, a general manager who's lost the job and is looking for options realized that, I may be worth talking to. And of course, this is not a formal professional coaching call, but I realized that there are several people who become stuck in career because they start blaming themselves for not building what they might call political equity in a system, and therefore they fall off the radar of being a favorite in that system. Okay, but uh, do people in corporations exercise sufficient self-control for a much higher purpose, or do they just go into that system merely to get the monthly paycheck? The monthly paycheck is more like the immediate gain of pleasure.
Mm.
Okay, but are they pacing their life out sufficiently so that they can overcome what is already known in science as those retirement blues or gerontological uh, maladjustments that people would make? Don't think they do that enough. Even recently, in uh, the major intervention I did at this US major, the head of the unit, who reports to the founder, uh, took a personal coaching call with me on paid basis, of course. And he realized that he has reached more than midlife and he's not even thought about retirement. So, what do they what do they give their conscious waking hours to? So, if there is no sense of that, they're not even aware that there's something called self-control that can be exercised. That's my sense of the self-control thing. So, whereas in my case, I
Awareness is also linked to self-awareness.
yes. So in my case, the state of self-awareness or self-control was this: that there are so many things happening out there, but the entire body of knowledge on which my future lies is to do with ongoing investigation of reality. And it cannot be done without your own investment in the process. And it must be done at the cost of ignorance of this principle among people I work with. And that is something that outlasted me. Otherwise, who in our batch would have done what I'm doing today? You know it from our own batch, right? From that point of view. So for me, that was self control. If I look back,
Mm. Yeah,
willing
not
to, yeah, willing to look at a future, knowing that this method and this approach to knowledge for breadwinning is something that should outlast just a momentary gain of a position or a title. Yeah, self control seems to be quite critical predictor. I think that's more a substantive angle for your research. I think.
yeah, yeah, yeah. Great. I think I got more than than I was looking for. I basically just wanted a detail of your views on happiness.
Mm.
So, Yes. And so then let's, if I have to summarize, it's an emotional state. It's something not to be pursued. It's something that is, uh, in retrospect, when you relive a moment that you were fully immersed in.
Not relive, reflect.
Reflect, yeah, yeah. Reflect about a moment that you were fully absorbed in, which
Yeah,
gave you the opportunity to use your skills and creativity and values, everything put together, and define that experience as something very, very joyful.
yeah.
Uh, right? So that, and coming to self awareness, mindfulness, being in the present, in each moment being unique in its own self, and yeah, kind of taking every moment of life as something that needs a different response, which comes to a question in my mind, Joseph. How does one react differently? I mean, that's one point I've not yet figured. The point that every moment will need a different response. I agree that yes, every moment. I mean, if I'm feeling thirsty now, I'll reach out for a glass of water.
That's a
If I feel,
physiological need.
but I'm responding to the situation.
Yeah, behaviorally
Your
you're
response,
responding.
yeah, your response to the mold was also to go investigate and see. No,
That's the physiological response.
again, yes. So, uh, so responses will be done, yeah, based on whether they're physiological, emotional, psychological, spiritual, whatever, but are based on certain familiar uh, experiences and knowledge base, which is all based on memory. Okay. So last time I react. I mean, last time I found mold on my toothbrush and shaving brush. Next time you start sneezing, the first thing you'll do is possibly go check again for these two things. So that's where memory comes into play.
Yeah, but before I went into that episode, I didn't have knowledge of finding something like fungus on this, right? I'm exploring.
I know, but what I'm saying is, in future, if an experience like this happens, you would have learned
That is
scientifically
that
and
is some that is something our biology allows for, in that it encodes that experience.
yes, yes, yes. So, uh, I'm just wanting to know how is the experiencer within you responding differently to each moment. That would be my last question for today.
So it's difficult to order and summon a set of attributes for that, but one would say that one is willing to look at, and this comes from, I think, a deeper question, that have I accepted within me my own terminality? Because if I don't accept that as a physical entity I will pass on, I'm not able to imbibe the principle
Mm,
that the moment of a few seconds ago is already dead, and that I'm now into the new.
mm,
And there, therefore, is this thing about different kind of meaningfulness, in that the now is also fully acknowledging of the death of the past. I think it's a temperamental culmination
mm,
that comes from accepting terminality. That there are other metaphysical questions that may explain consciousness beyond the body and stuff like that, that our intelligence at the moment may not fully be able to trap and explain. Possible. But to your question, how do you come into the moment differently? I think it begins with the acceptance that terminality exists, or
mm,
terminality is to be acknowledged
mm.
and uh,
Embraced.
yes.
Mm. Okay. So thank you so much for your time, Joseph. And I'll wait for this recording because I kind of gave up to, the word by word writing, and I was more
I'll
trying
send
to
you the record. Yes,
absorb, what we were talking. So really nice to listen to the recording. And thank
I'll
you for
send
your
it.
time.
No pleasure.
I think, uh, I think it's the most precious resource anybody has, and I'm extremely grateful for all
Yeah,
your
I don't
time.
know. I don't know where I picked it. It's one of the interviews that Brené Brown took recently,
Mm,
in which the interviewee says, what is love?
mm.
Love is time, the giving.
I beginning to see it's the most precious resource we have.
Yes.
Most precious.
And uh, seeing differently from what I learned from my Jesuit master, Dr. Dick McHugh, love is the decision to give
Mm,
from your momentary awareness
mm,
of how fully present and aware you are to that occasion. It's the giving that is love. So, in that sense, whatever giving in time that you give,
mm,
that is important. Yeah, time
mm,
is love.
mm. No, no. I truly believe in that myself. So I really, really appreciate second revisiting of whatever data that I needed more. So thanks a lot.
Yeah.
Thank
So,
you.
so good luck and good speed with this. I'll send you this recording,
Thank
uh,
you.
and all the best. So, catch up later then.
Catch up later. Thanks a lot.
Okay, then bye.